everything is falling down for you guys because people perceive you as bullies.
Blake Lively's lawyer has officially thrown in the towel. And honestly, who can blame him?
How the New York Times actively vouched for the veracity of its false narrative.
After months of fake claims, media stunts, and courtroom chaos, even he couldn't defend the circus anymore. This wasn't justice. It was a PR meltdown dragging innocent people and legal sanity straight into the trash.
We actually want all evidence to come out that's proper and appropriate evidence.
Imagine being so deep in your own fantasy world that your own lawyer throws up his hands, wipes the sweat off his forehead, and says, "You know what? I'd rather represent a parking ticket." Because that's exactly what just happened. After months of legal theater that felt more like a scripted Netflix drama than an actual lawsuit, Blake Lively's legal team just walked out. Not eased out, not resigned quietly. They quit like they were escaping a sinking ship loaded with PR grenades and tantrums in legalese.
That you're not defined by anything any man has ever done to you or will ever do to you, that your identity is you and you define that.
Let's talk about what pushed this legal professional to the edge. Blake, alongside her ever so silent but somehow always involved husband, Ryan Reynolds, went full toddler in a toy store mode in court. They weren't filing motions, they were flinging them. We're talking multiple Rule 11 sanctions, shameless attempts to quash subpoenas, and yes, because of course, they dragged Taylor Swift's name into their mess like that was somehow going to fix anything. Spoiler alert, it didn't. It backfired so hard, the courtroom probably still smells like burnt reputation.
We actually want all evidence to come out that's proper and appropriate evidence.
And then came May 13th. Mark that date, because that's when all hell broke loose on paper. Brian Friedman's team, aka the ones actually behaving like grown-ups in this circus, dropped an explosive letter that pretty much handed Blake and Ryan their own egos on a silver platter. They called Blake's tactics legally frivolous and emotionally manipulative.
It was monstrous what she did, and she's got to pay for it.
Live birth porn.
When lawyers start describing legal strategies like toxic relationships, you know it's time to run. And that's what Blake's team did. They didn't just quit, they rebelled. It was a loud, clapping exit from a woman who's turned the courtroom into her personal stage and expected applause.
It's going to have to be a full-blown, I am sorry, I lied, I am a terrible person, tail in between the legs, and that's what we deserve.
Now, here's the part where things get even more deliciously stupid. Back in April 2024, Blake and Ryan's legal squad thought it would be cute to throw over a dozen motions into the mix. You read that right. 12 plus motions. 2 of them were sanctions requests.
One of the big ways that narcissists attack their victims is by using the legal system to bully their opponents. So according to them, these are some of the common tactics you'll see of them in court.
One filed by Blake's personal lawyer, the other by Ryan's personal pick, Michael Goddell, because God forbid he let his wife have lost all the cringe moments to herself. These weren't well thought out legal arguments either. They were described, and I'm quoting insiders here, as literal copy-paste jobs.
So I just kind of had her down to a prototype and said, I'm going to pump the brakes and see what happens. And then when Brian Friedman came back with the facts, they were just undeniable. You know, it was undeniable.
This avalanche of legal diarrhea came right after they were exposed for the Vans sham lawsuit. Yes, that fake legal stunt they tried to use like a backdoor attack on Justin Baldoni and the Wayfair folks. So, how did Friedman's crew respond? They let the associate Ellen Gopp loose on May 13th, and she went scorched earth in court filings. She called their motions improper, duplicative, and harassing. That's lawyer speak. Are y'all drunk? Because really, if you're going to try and weaponize the legal system, at least put some effort into it.
Then they publish 170 pages of perfectly documented texts and emails between all the parties that basically show Blake to be the aggressor. Here's the proof.
And then, as if things weren't already flaming hot, court insiders spilled that Blake's legal team wasn't even trying to win anymore. They were just trying to dodge hearings altogether. Yep, instead of actually showing up and arguing facts, they were trying to manipulate Rule 11 procedures to sneak in victories by wearing the court down. One judge reportedly called it a drama queen routine, and I don't blame him. Blake turned courtroom filings into BuzzFeed articles. Her obsession with winning the narrative was so intense, her own legal team started whispering about the internal pressure they were under to push claims that made zero legal sense, but made great headlines.
That's the whole point of a lawsuit, is you just start with allegations, and allegations are not evidence. They're just statements of fact that help establish this is the claim that I'm bringing.
So now we hit the real kicker, the part where the dam broke. That same May 13th letter, it dropped a bomb, and not the fun, fireworks kind. It exposed how Blake's legal team was pushing Rule 11 violations like candy at a party. They went after people who had no legal standing in the case. Jamie Heath, Melissa Nathan, Valden. Just casually tossing names into the fire like it was a gossip column. Friedman's team clapped back, calling the sanctions demand not just weak, but a straight-up weapon of harassment. Yes, that's a real quote. And I don't know about you, but when a judge hears that your legal strategy is harassment dressed up in filing paper, things are not going your way.
And I knew a bit about her. I knew how she grew up. I knew that she kind of was one of these people. What tends to be the case is that when you grow up with everything, you create things out of nothing because you're looking for struggle in your life and you're used to getting whatever it is that you want.
One of the biggest issues? Blake's team was using something called group pleading, which is basically a lazy way of saying we're blaming all of y'all, deal with it. It's legally sketchy and intellectually insulting. And the best part? Even if it were a real problem, it's fixable. It's what they call a curable defect in court, not something you start flinging sanctions over, which makes Blake's strategy about as sound as her judgment in choosing co-defendants.
And how this filing is pure comedy and insanity. It literally contradicts itself, and it's not even admissible because of certain things that are in there.
And while all this was going down, the silence from her legal team was deafening. Not because they were quietly confident, but because they were getting grilled. Behind closed doors, they were being called out for letting Blake do the legal equivalent of playing whack-a-mole with subpoenas. She wanted gag orders slapped on critics, discovery silenced, and subpoenas dodged like it was a TikTok challenge. And her legal team? They just stood there, probably trying to remember how much student debt they were still paying off to deal with this disaster.
Do not believe Blake Lively is that, but again, you can clearly see, in my opinion, the narcissism at bare minimum that's going on with her.
Let's just be honest here. When your own legal representation starts quietly aligning with the arguments of the people you're suing, and then packs up and leaves, it's not just a red flag. It's a red billboard with flashing lights and a siren. Blake Lively wasn't just a difficult client. She became a liability so massive her lawyers would rather risk working retail during tax season than file another motion on her behalf. This isn't how court works. This isn't how law works. And this sure as hell isn't how justice works. But it is how Blake Lively works. Performative, petty, and completely out of touch with reality. And her lawyer? Well, he finally got the memo.
You guys were complicit here. You guys were involved in this every step of the way.
Let's get something straight. When a lawyer realizes he's not working on a lawsuit, but starring in a deranged press release written by a fame-hungry actress who thinks Deadpool memes count as legal arguments, it's time to run. And Blake Lively's now former legal team? They ran like the building was on fire and she was holding the match. This wasn't about law or justice or facts. This was about image control, press manipulation, narrative engineering. And the second her legal team caught on that they were defending a PR-addicted narcissist, they tapped out. Fast.
The false accusations forces the opponent to be on the defensive and causes the court system to frown when the opponent makes a similar charge against the narcissist. Do you see that? So they've already said, we're going to file sanctions for Van Sham lawsuit, and your attorneys are acting unethically, and you have filed a frivolous lawsuit against us. That's what Wayfair has said.
You'd think that after filing a ridiculous number of sanctions and blowing up over every subpoena, she'd eventually start focusing on, evidence. But nope. According to people close to the team, Blake and her lovable legal genius Ryan Reynolds actually asked their attorneys to include tweets, tabloid headlines, And yes, Deadpool jokes in official court filings. I'm not kidding. This woman genuinely thought a superhero punchline would be persuasive in a federal courtroom. We're now living in an age where Blake Lively's legal strategy is indistinguishable from a BuzzFeed quiz.
Yeah, and again, at the same time, Nathan assembled a team that could dominate social media through full social account takedowns by starting threads of theories and,
Hold that thought.
here we go, generally working to change the narrative. So it's impossible to know how much they planted and how much of it originated organically. Well, wait a minute.
But wait, it gets better. One of the actual filings submitted to court included a section where Blake's team questioned whether Disney was complicit in Ryan using shareholder revenues for a personal grudge. Yeah, apparently this lawsuit wasn't enough drama, so they decided to drag Disney into it too. Like Mickey Mouse was somewhere in a boardroom plotting Ryan's courtroom revenge. They tried to argue that a pool scene in Deadpool and Wolverine, yes, a literal movie clip, was somehow evidence that Ryan mocked Justin Baldoni. Because of course, when your legal argument has no leg to stand on, you start quoting superhero movies and pretend it's testimony.
Senseless motions and hearings in order to delay the process. They will file senseless motions, excessive hearings, and multiple postponements. This is again done to drain the financial resources of the opponent and create an atmosphere of the never-ending lawsuit.
The lawyers were done. Mentally, spiritually, legally, done. One source said it best. This wasn't legal strategy, it was a PR stunt gone rogue. The legal team had signed on for a lawsuit, not a cinematic universe. Blake Lively wasn't trying to win in court. She was trying to trend on Twitter. She didn't want to submit evidence, she wanted to submit vibes. And her lawyers, bless their broken spirits, finally realized they weren't defending a client. They were ghostwriting for a walking press release with a god complex. And then came the clapback of the century. Brian Friedman, cool as ever, filed a legal nuke that dismantled Blake's circus from top to bottom. He refused to play into her baiting tactics and instead filed what can only be described as a surgical takedown. His response shredded Blake's entire motion and accused her of manufacturing drama for media play. That one line alone probably made Blake's lawyer consider a different career path. Maybe yoga, maybe goat farming, anything but this. Even the judge wasn't having it. Blake's request to sanction Friedman, completely denied, ruled legally hollow, just like the claims she's been parading around since day one. And to make it even worse, the court actually warned her team that their repeated attempts to silence their critics bordered on First Amendment violations. Yes, that's how far gone Blake was. She wasn't just trying to win a lawsuit anymore. She was trying to gag anyone who didn't write nice things about her on the internet. At that point, her lawyer had seen enough. Word is, he flat out refused to sign any more filings unless Blake's entire strategy changed. Which, of course, it didn't. Because why adjust when you can triple down on your own delusion, right? Rather than scale back the insanity, Blake just kept charging forward. Like she genuinely believed she was the misunderstood protagonist in a courtroom rom-com. Except no one was laughing, not even her own team.
But they keep going to the court so that they can get ahead of things so that when Baldoni and Wayfair do respond, the court looks at them like they're crazy.
Behind the scenes, it was even uglier. Sources from inside her legal circle say the team started cracking under the pressure, not from the case itself, but from Blake's total disregard for legal ethics. Remember when she tried to subpoena Taylor Swift's phone records? Yeah, that was from a fake lawsuit, not a real one. A fabricated legal stunt used to dig into personal data and leak it later. That wasn't a slip-up. That was a weaponized abusive process. And her lawyers were not okay with it. The tension got so bad that even Michael Gottle's own sanctions filing was rejected by his own firm partners because they said it was redundant and emotionally driven. You heard that right. Even the people who work for him were like, hey man, this is unhinged, chill. It wasn't about justice, it was about revenge, headlines, and emotional outbursts wrapped in legal jargon. And just when you think this circus couldn't add another act, it did. Apparently, Blake was so obsessed with looking stronger than Baldoni that she treated court filings like Instagram captions. I wish that was a joke. She literally demanded rewrites of motions to make herself look like the boss babe of the year, in legal text. Can you imagine being a Harvard-educated lawyer and being told to make this motion sound more empowering? Because that's what was happening.
Everything, and it really was quite horrific because you just go, what kind of a monster even goes through with this CRD filing? Like, they're basically bullying him again in the lawsuit.
And then there's Leslie Sloan, a publicist who thought she was a lawyer. At one point, she was reportedly reviewing court documents before they were even finalized. Yes, the PR manager had more influence over legal filings than the actual lawyers. Because when you're Blake Lively, why listen to legal experts when you have a publicist with a Wi-Fi connection and a Pinterest board titled Courtroom Chic?
As we know, Justin Baldoni is suing him, Blake Lively, and their PR person, Leslie Sloan, for $400 million.
Let's just call it like it is. The lawyers didn't quit the case. They quit her. They quit the Instagram strategy, the drama, the lies, the fake lawsuits, the Deadpool jokes, the Taylor Swift subpoenas, the tabloid-level tantrums. They quit the ego trip she called a lawsuit and walked away with whatever dignity they had left. Blake Lively wanted legal warriors. She got crisis managers with law degrees who finally said, enough.
But it looks as though she's a narcissist, like an actual diagnosed narcissist.
And now here she is, lawyerless, strategyless, and spiraling. Still trying to control the narrative while the courtroom laughs in slow motion. You can't PR your way out of a mess when the judge already sees the script. And no amount of Ryan's passive smirks or Deadpool memes can save her from the fact that the people who knew her best, the lawyers who saw it all, chose to walk away instead of walk her to victory. That says everything. Let's talk about the innocent people Blake Lively decided to casually toss into her legal dumpster fire like they were extras in her self-directed courtroom movie. Jamie Heath, Melissa Nathan, and even high-ranking WME execs, people who had nothing to do with her so-called trauma parade, suddenly found themselves named in her lawsuit. And not with nuance, not with facts, but with the grace of someone blindly throwing darts in the dark hoping to hit relevance. Their alleged crime? Apparently just existing near Justin Baldoni. That's all it took for Blake to slap on the label of intentional interference with zero. And I mean zero, actual evidence. We're not talking about a technical error. We're talking about Blake and her legal team tossing names around like they were trying to fill seats at a charity gala. The court filings made them sound like criminal masterminds when, in reality, they were just professionals doing their jobs, completely uninvolved in Blake's mess. This wasn't legal strategy, this was defamation by association, and it made her entire case look like a personal vendetta fueled by ego, not truth. Now here's where it gets extra humiliating. Even Wayfair's legal team, the ones actually playing by the rules, pointed out that the issue Blake's lawyers raised was what's called a curable defect. That means even if there was a mistake in how the plaintiffs were named, it could be fixed with a simple amendment. A normal person would say, cool, let's fix it and move on. But not our Blake. No, she decided to double down and demand sanctions instead. Because why correct a harmless clerical issue when you can blow it up into a courtroom crisis and hope it trends? Even the judge had to step in and call it out. He flatly stated that Blake's obsessive use of Rule 11, the same rule she keeps misquoting like it's her personal weapon, looked more like she was just trying to re-argue a motion to dismiss. Translation: you've already lost this argument, Blake. Stop trying to sneak it back in with a new font and dramatic flair. When a judge starts recognizing your motions as desperate reruns, it's probably time to stop calling it strategy and start calling it what it actually is. Delusion dipped in desperation, served with a side of public embarrassment. Blake weaponized the legal system not to seek justice, but to seek revenge. And the only people she hurt were the ones who had no business being dragged through the circus. She turned colleagues into collateral damage. And the saddest part? It still didn't make her case stronger. It just made her look smaller. And speaking of small, let's talk about Ryan Reynolds. The man who somehow always looks like he's above the chaos while being knee-deep in it. Ryan played this whole thing like he was legally distant. He wasn't tweeting legal threats. he wasn't holding press conferences, but his name was everywhere, on sanction filings, buried in legal letters, and even featured in SNL jokes that were entered into the damn case. That's right, Saturday Night Live jokes became part of an actual legal discussion, and Ryan's role in that mess was very much not invisible. Friedman's team, being the only adults in the room, brought up a very serious question. Did Ryan misuse Disney shareholder money to fund this PR circus against Baldoni? Because if so, that's not just shady. That's SEC-level scrutiny waiting to happen. You can't dip into Mickey Mouse's wallet to settle personal scores and not expect the federal government to raise an eyebrow. And let's not forget the now infamous pool scene in Deadpool and Wolverine. Apparently, Ryan's big brain move was to use an actual film clip to mock Justin Baldoni, even while his wife was supposedly recovering from severe emotional damage. If your wife is truly traumatized, you don't stage punchlines about her alleged abuser in a Marvel movie. You don't wink at the camera while dragging someone through court. And guess what? The judge likely noticed. Ryan's entire role in this disaster has been classic PR misdirection. Pretend you're not involved, quietly fan the flames, and let your wife take the fall when things implode. Except this time, the courts aren't buying it. The same guy who used to trend for being funny online is now trending for being legally entangled in a lawsuit that could cost him more than just a few awkward headlines. This isn't a meme war anymore. This is court. And the jokes? They're starting to look like confessions. And finally, let's talk about the mess that's left. Blake's lawyers didn't just resign, they escaped. They got out of a burning building built entirely out of her narcissism, PR addiction, and absolute refusal to face the truth. By the time those May 13th letters surfaced, it was already too late. The judge had seen the manipulation. The public had seen the leaks. And Friedman? He was just standing there, completely unbothered, while Blake flailed in legal quicksand. Her request to punish Friedman? Denied. Her sanctions claims? Laughed out of court. And that stupid subpoena for Taylor Swift? Yeah, that's the smoking gun that proved Blake's whole lawsuit was built on lies, staged drama, and a terrifying lack of self-awareness. Ryan's credibility is shattered. Blake's courtroom strategy has become a punchline. And Swift, who said absolutely nothing publicly, ended up being the most powerful witness without even stepping foot in a courtroom.